West Ham United are entering a critical point, a bit of a delicate stage of our transfer planning for this summer. With the news that we should be hearing the outcome of Lucas Paqueta's FA hearing sometime today, I do wonder if the £145 million bank loan that was agreed by West Ham and Barclays Bank last week might be used to sign some players in case the Brazilian is found guilty. Now, it's only a theory, but it does make me wonder as to why West Ham asked for such a large loan, given that they only had to pay back £40 million to Barclays in the first place. Now, when I inquired whether any of this money might be used for transfers, I was told categorically no. But given that we've been unable to attract offers for any of our players, and apart from Kudus, of course, and given the outcome of the Paqueta hearing could go against us, might some of this loan be used to buy the players that we need to replace Lucas Paqueta? Now, don't forget, at the end of last season, it was widely reported that apart from Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Jared Bowen, every single West Ham player was apparently up for sale. But to date, we've only received the one bid and we've only made the one sale of Kudus, of course. There are still a few weeks to go in this transfer window, and all that could change. Of course it could. But the outcome of the Paqueta hearing might push us into action more sooner rather than later. Now, all eyes are on the Paqueta outcome. And if the player is found guilty, West Ham are going to have to move fast to get in adequate replacements for him. And perhaps some of this bank loan may have to go towards player purchases until we sell, or even if we do sell, any other players in the current squad. Now, we all know Lucas Paqueta was first charged 2 years ago with 4 counts of spot fixing that were alleged to have happened back in 2022. It has taken the FA 2 years to investigate, and even after the hearing closed more than 50 days ago, they've only just gotten to be announcing a conclusion. And I think we're all waiting for that announcement to happen sometime soon, sometime today. Now, if Paqueta is found guilty, then we're in uncharted waters, as he could be slapped with a lifetime ban, but no one knows whether he'll be able to continue playing whilst an appeal is lodged. And inevitably, an appeal will be lodged. There is no way of knowing how long an appeal might take. It's taken 2 years to get this far, and I dare say an appeal could take just as long, if not longer. So therefore, if it is going to be that long, then will he be allowed to carry on playing whilst an appeal is held? There's no precedent set for this. No precedence has been set for this, whether Paqueta can or can't play during an appeal. I would imagine he can, but who knows? Now, if he's found innocent, then there is speculation that the player may want to be as far away from the FA as possible, and rumours of him either returning to his boyhood club, Flamengo, or being sold in a lucrative deal to Saudi, they both still linger. Now, to be honest, I can't see Flamengo being able to afford Paqueta, so it could be Saudi, maybe even a Man City deal, but I think that Man City deal may have fallen away a few years ago. Of course, if innocent, and if we do sell him, then that answers how we'll be able to fund further replacements into the squad. But I'm sure he can still fetch a sizable return in the transfer market. 40, maybe 50 million, maybe 40. Either way, we're all hoping for the best, but perhaps, just in case, West Ham are preparing for the worst in terms of getting that loan sorted. And perhaps this is why we've yet to sort out our midfield. The Paqueta outcome is going to be key as to which direction we take. But even if he is found innocent, and even if he does stay, we're still going to need further reinforcements in midfield anyway. Paqueta aside, one answer to our potential transfer activity did seem to come out this week. It's now highly unlikely that we're going to be looking for any more defenders in this transfer window because on Thursday, we saw the photos that Gerd is seems to be truly back in the fold, and he's been handed the number 5 shirt, the same shirt number that he wears for the Moroccan national team. Now, personally, I would have given the number 5 to Dinos Mavropanos. Only kidding. I am pleased that whatever the conversations might have been had between Gerd and Potter seem to define that he's definitely back, and that will put paid to us searching for yet further central defensive reinforcements, unless, of course, Dinos does leave. And then, of course, we will need to look for another central defender. But at this moment in time, with a Gerd being given the number 5 shirt, it looks our defence is sorted. Now, as we speak, Graham Potter has 3 defenders available to him that he didn't have when he took over in January. Gerd himself, Diouf, and Carl Walker-Peters. Now, what's missing is a goalie to complete the back line. And as we've been hearing for quite some time, Leicester's Mads Hermansen is meant to be top of the list. So with Gerd taking the number 5 shirt and Kilman having requested the number 3 shirt that Aaron Creswell wore, the only shirt numbers still vacant between 1 and 11, apart from number 6, which has been retired, are numbers 1 and 4. Room for a keeper and a midfielder? Now, up until this week, our transfer policy of buying young players and reducing the average age of the squad seemed to kind of been going okay. We bought El Hadji Malik Diouf, but the plan to reduce the average age of the squad came to a sudden halt when, with the transfer story that has dominated West Ham columns since Tuesday. Yep, the potential signing of Callum Wilson has, on the whole, created an enormous amount of unrest, anger, confusion, and frustration amongst the West Ham fans. Before the 24-25 season was ending, Graham Potter had decided that he was going to let go of the old rear guard at West Ham. And those players who were out of contract, who were coming to an end of their contracts, would all be leaving. Now, as much as we expected some of the 6 contract players with their contracts ending, as much as we expected some of them to leave, I don't think we all thought that all 6 would be out the door. Of course, that included Lucas Fabianski, defenders Kurt Zuma, Vladimir Soufal, and Aaron Creswell, as well as strikers Danny Ings and Mikel Antonio. Now, personally, I genuinely thought that Fabianski would have been kept on, and maybe, just maybe, Creswell as well, only because that we knew transfer funds were going to be limited. And these 2 players, or certainly Fabianski, would have at least filled a gap in the squad whilst we used whatever transfer funds we had available to strengthen in defence, midfield, especially midfield, and a striker. But that wasn't to be. Now, since the departure of these 6 players, we've actually replaced them with the return and the purchases of 6 other players. Gerd, who I've already mentioned, and Maxwell Cornet came back from their respective loan deals. We have welcomed back Freddie Potts from his loan at Portsmouth, who, barring a calamitous American tour, will definitely be in the senior squad for next season. And we have seen the arrival, as I've said, of Carl Walker-Peters and El Hadji Malik Diouf. And to add to that, the surprise package of Callum Marshall, who had a really decent loan spell at Huddersfield as well. Now, if he continues to bang the goals in, especially against Premier League opposition during this US tour, then instead of sending him out on loan, he may well stake a claim to be part of the senior squad alongside Potts from the academy this coming season. So up until this week, everything kind of looked to be on track for what Potter and Macaulay want to create at West Ham, as I've said, a younger, more dynamic squad of players. Graham Potter was very clear and specific about that. He wants to reduce the size of the squad and he wants to reduce the average age. Now, even the signing of Walker Peters really didn't seem to sway from that too much. Sure, we heard that apparently Potter didn't want Walker Peters, but to have such an experienced player around who's only just recently turned 28 and coming in on a free transfer and not to be on massive wages seems to be quite a decent, astute move. Now, Carl Walker Peters, as I've stated, will offer us flexibility in our lineup, in the way we set ourselves up in defence, in midfield, and so on. So far, so good. And then, as I've mentioned, the bombshell that came out on Tuesday when we heard that we were being seriously linked to 33-year-old injury-prone free agent Callum Wilson, and the West Ham world just went into overdrive. Look, I'm not going to go into yet another diatribe over why I think Callum Wilson is a bad idea. But if he does sign, yeah, he'll get my support whilst he's wearing the West Ham shirt. I don't agree with it, but I'll be open-minded enough to see how it goes. Now, if he turns out to be a poor signing in terms of like picking up injuries, keeping him out of action, being unavailable for selection, all West Ham fans will say, I told you so. And I'll worry about how that impacts on our season ahead and how the fans will react to David Sullivan, who seems to be the only one content. Well, Sullivan and Sorthouse, who seem to be the only ones content with pushing this deal through. But as I've said, if Wilson does sign for us, I hope he proves me and everybody else, all the thousands of West Ham fans, I hope he proves us all wrong by scoring a hatful of goals for us. And I'd even be happy for him to get away with a blatant handball. I think you know what I mean. But the thoughts of signing Wilson does raise several questions as to what exactly or where exactly is our transfer policy heading? And who is ultimately responsible for transfer decisions? Now, when the senior source was asked, he said that it's the manager who makes the final decision, the final call on transfers. So did he agree the Wilson deal? Or did he agree that given it was a low financial risk with bonuses based on appearances, etc., that he was happy with that because he's highly unlikely to use him much anyway? But whether he gave the nod to a Wilson deal or not, it certainly isn't helping to reduce the average age of the squad. And Wilson's presence means that another place is being used up in the squad, which means that the squad is not coming down in size. But if we do sign Wilson, does that mean this is it for strikers? Since that statement on Monday that Potter is no longer prioritising strikers and that he will focus on midfielders, attacking midfielders, instead, all of a sudden, we've been linked to more strikers than the rest of the transfer window as a whole. This week, as we're like every day since Monday, there's one striker after another being linked to us. But if Wilson does sign, I think that really is it for strikers. I think we won't be looking for any others. And then that leads us on to the goalie and midfielder situation. What kind of keeper and what kind of midfielders are we now likely to get? Now, I mentioned earlier that I genuinely thought that we'd keep Fabianski for at least another season. As I've said, merely to focus on using the transfer money on other areas in the squad that need strengthening. But now it's evident that we have no choice but to pay good money for what we hope to be a younger goalie who will be more than just a backup, not just a number two to Areola, but one who will genuinely challenge him for that number one goalie position. Now, we've been hearing that we've been linked to, from day one on the transfer window open, that we've been linked to Mads Hermansen of Leicester. But every time we read that we're about to prepare to make a move for him, his price goes up and then it all goes quite silent. And using Wilson as a benchmark for the striker role, are we also going to have to end up going for an older goalie because we can't afford him? Another free agent, maybe. We can't afford Hermansen. Another free agent, maybe, who will just end up being cover for the goalie position. If it goes that way, then we might as well have kept Fabianski for a further year. And then we look at the midfield situation and the continuous link of Harvey Elliott we keep hearing that he's Potter's number one midfield target. Now, the player himself gave an honest interview on Thursday, suggesting that he seriously has to consider his future at Liverpool, especially because of the World Cup looming, and he has a desire to be competing for a place in that England squad. But how will he achieve this if he's only a bit part player for Liverpool? In the interview Elliot did this week, he sounds as if he's resigned to the fact that he has to leave Liverpool, given the players that Arne Slot has brought in over the summer. It's going to be quite competitive for places in that Liverpool lineup, and I don't think Elliot fancies his chances. If that means then him having to leave Liverpool to get regular game time, he accepts that, and he's got to do what he must do for his career. But to get into the England squad might mean going for a team that has a higher profile than West Ham at this moment in time. I hate myself saying that, but it's a reality. And it won't surprise me if Elliot does snub a move to West Ham and opts for a team like, I don't know, Nottingham Forest maybe, even Aston Villa if they can get their finances sorted, maybe even Spurs. All these teams, of course, offer European football next season as well. So at this moment in time, if it's not going to be Harvey Elliott, then where do we go from here? Now, there is, of course, the other story, that Douglas Luiz has gone AWOL. He's not returned to Juve pre-season training in a stance that suggests relationships between him and the Italian club have reached an impasse. Now, West Ham are keen to get the attacking midfielder on loan with an option to buy. But Juve want an outright sale or at least an obligation to buy. Now, if Paqueta goes for one reason or another, Luiz would be a fantastic replacement for him if we can get this one over the line. Now, even if Paqueta is innocent and stays, imagine those two Brazilians controlling our midfield. Might we end up again looking for an older midfielder if we do not get Elliott or Douglas Luiz? Luiz is 27, so that's a reasonable age. But if we don't get either Elliott or Luiz, does it again mean that we might have to get an older midfielder just to make up the numbers in much the same way that Wilson may do in the striker area? The Carl Macauley project so far is really only El Hadji Malik Diouf. The list of players that he's targeted seems to be forgotten about, and I'm worried that we're going to find ourselves again having no choice but to bring in players for the here and now rather than the players who are good enough for the now, but who will get even better in the future. Now, whilst I don't expect West Ham United to be able to fix all our squad issues in just one summer transfer window, I kind of did or do expect to see at least two, maybe three players similar to the Diouf signing. You know, three good, young, up-and-coming players who will do a job today and will be valuable tomorrow. And what's holding us back from doing this? Well, money, of course, or the lack of it. Plus, of course, David Sullivan's inability to let go, his inability not to interfere with transfers is also a hindrance. But the money part is obviously linked to West Ham being unable to sell any of the players as we expected to sell, as I've said earlier in the show. As mentioned, it was expected that we'd sell a Gerd or Alvarez or Cornet or Mavropanos, Souček or Füllkrug. But at this moment in time, it looks likely that they're here for next season. And not one decent bid has come in which would tempt West Ham to sell. So that could be that, you know, if we did sell any of those players, it could then help Macaulay achieve his dream of building the younger, more dynamic squad for the future. Instead, we find ourselves building a squad for the here and now, or looking like, yet again, building a squad for the here and now, and having to make do with players who, like I said, are not as young as we'd like them to be. I'd love to think that Hermansen and Elliott and even Luiz might be the next players arriving at West Ham. If that happens, my belief in the Macaulay model will be restored. But if it doesn't, then I think we might start thinking that the dream, the Macaulay dream, is dead before it even started. Look, all eyes really are on Lucas Paqueta and what happens with the FA hearing today. So let's see where we go from there, because that will certainly help to define what we need to do for the rest of this transfer window. Do leave your comments. Do, if you are yet to subscribe to this channel, do become a subscriber. Do hit the like button, because that really does help the channel as well. Thank you for watching and listening to me, and I will see you all again very soon.